Hello, boys and girls and children of all ages. Fat Bastard Wannabe Buddha coming at you tonight. Was going to talk about maybe Larry Summers as the new Fed chairman, but it looks like maybe Ferguson or Donald Cole might get the nomination, and that Summer was a red herring in order to sneak back in one of the Greenspan appointments. But I might cover that in a later blog. What I wanted to talk tonight about is basically Snowden. I find Snowden's an interesting situation, and how the government itself went after Snowden so hard. Most people would assume, my theory is slightly different than what most people assume. Most people assume that they went after Snowden because it was a major breach in NSA security, and it showed a means of collecting information and how information was processed, and he had too much information as far as the collection was, and that's why he's an actual threat. My theory is radically different than that. I think it's an interesting thing that Snowden is a representative of the new economy. And my thesis is basically this, that we switched to private contractors as far as our intelligence gathering services, and we don't have as much control over the private contractors. That's why we went so hardcore on poor old Chelsea Manning, or Bradley Manning, however you wish to term the young woman in question. That's why they went hardcore on them. Normally they can take care of all the wet work guys by just giving them operations inside, the black waters of the world. That's how they take care of the wet work guys and the SEAL teams and other things. But as far as the intelligence gathering, they're always a little iffy how they can promote those into the capitalist system to make sure they can retain their loyalty. So Bradley Manning had to be made an example of. But Snowden also had to be made an example of, and they sort of failed to do that. Snowden's an interesting character in the sense that he's a representative of, in many ways, the tail end of my generation and the beginning of the millennium generation, especially their attitude towards their employers, including if their employers happen to be the U.S. government. Neil McCline had an interesting book several years back called No Logo, in which he laid out how the disparity between the old 9-to-5, 40-hour, blue-collar, white-collar, I worked for IBM for 50 years, worker of the late greatest generation and in the beginning of the baby boomer generation, had sort of given away to a lot of millenniums and Gen Xers who just really didn't have any loyalty to the companies they worked for because the companies didn't show any loyalty to them. And that, in my opinion, is what Snowden represents. He's a whole generation of people that the country and the government and the corporations have absolutely no loyalty to. They have showed them repeatedly that they don't care about them or recognize them or have any loyalty to them, so why should they have any loyalty back towards them? And that's very frightening for the machine itself. The machine depends upon loyalty and fear, and Snowden sort of throws a little monkey wrench into that system. One of my favorite comic book writers is Grant Morrison. He wrote The Invisibles. What is interesting is several years back, during the promotional scheme of The Invisibles, especially when Great Britain was turning towards its national security state and cameras everywhere, especially to deal with some of the IRA bombings and stuff, that they were the sort of the petri dish of hyper surveillance. So Grant Morrison was asked about, who watches the watchers? What is his opinion on this great surveillance scheme that's unfolding around? And he basically pointed out something that the system hasn't really taken into account. And namely, if you have to hire somebody to watch the cameras, to sift through the emails. They got algorithms to do it to a degree, but you still have to have somebody, basically put boots on the ground, as the term is, and to use a little cliche in military jargon. You have to have someone to actually go through the emails or go through the camera and watch the cameras. Well, the guys watching the cameras, they ain't getting paid much. They have a boring life. They might want to go and have a nice little wank in the bathroom from time to time. During that time, the cameras ain't getting watched. And that's sort of what Snowden shows, is there's no way to control a large portion of the apparatus that they are dependent upon. And that's why they came so hardcore upon Snowden, is they don't have no way to control all the people that they need in order to staff the machine. And they were able to control the greatest generation by basically blind patriotism. That generation was somewhat naive on a lot of things. And baby boomers, it was just basically, I want mine. I got to have the newest and the greatest and the money and the status and everything else. Well, that's transient, and the status and the money and everything else isn't there as much as it wants, and it's not as an effective means of control as it was for how they used to control the middle class. And the middle class, especially in the intelligentsia, as people like Greenwald and Snowden point out, they don't have any loyalty. They're out for themselves. Maybe he was trying to do something good or anything else. That's sort of irrelevant in my opinion. I just find it very interesting that he shows a huge flaw in the system. The old Fight Club flaw, that the people pumping the gas and manning the checkout counters can shut the system down anytime they want to. And they haven't an answer for it. That's my thought for the night. Thank you very much for your time and effort. Hope you enjoy it. Please like, subscribe, follow, whatever it is they tell you to do on this YouTube thing. Have a good night. Thank you.